It's interesting. I get this question quite often, and I had no emotional response towards it.
Okay.
I saw it as just a data point in my story.
Interesting.
Like, this is just part of the story, and it's something I did. And I think motherhood is so beautiful, but I think you can be strategic about it.
Well, I am so excited to welcome our next guest. We have lots to talk about and lots to share because you are our youngest guest that has frozen her eggs. And I think as a 20-something-year-old, you can offer a whole new perspective. So I want to welcome Shania to our podcast. Welcome to Quiet the Clock, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I think when I reached out to you, I said, we haven't had any 20-year-olds on the podcast. We did actually have a 29-year-old when we filmed in LA. That episode is not out yet, but you're still the youngest. And if you could walk us through sort of how you learned about egg freezing, what made you think about family planning and egg freezing at 25 years old, that would be amazing. Because I think, I was sharing off camera, one of the intentions of starting these conversations, cultivating these conversations, is to just inform more women. And as someone that did this in their 30s, I felt up against that clock. And I think if we can empower and inform and just educate women about this, they have that information to make the decision sooner. So I would love to hear your decision-making process, how you learned about this.
Yeah. So it was Christmas.
Okay.
It was Christmas Day, December of 2022. And I was eating ice cream and brownies. And my sister comes over and she's like, so have you ever thought about freezing your eggs? And I was like, what are you talking about?
What did you think when she said that? Like, you're just like enjoying Christmas
Day.
Day.
My family was around. She's just like casually dropping the bomb. And I was like, I've never thought about it, nor do I know anyone my age or in my age range thinking about it.
Had you heard anything about that before your sister? And it's so funny. You're the second guest whose sister called them out on a holiday. I had another guest. It was like around the Thanksgiving table.
Yeah.
And her sister was like, when are you freezing your eggs? And so I guess our families are looking out for us.
Yeah. And, I think life gives you whispers. So I think this was like a whisper for me to think about it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
My sister is a physician and I am in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my PhD. And so in just the ecosystem that I'm in, I've heard about it and I know the research on it. And I know she has just such an evidence-based perspective on it. So I trusted her perspective when she brought it up to me. My brother then just chimes in, yeah, you should think about it. And I was like, okay. And so fast forward, I did my own research. I did my own discovery on the internet. I didn't find very women sharing their experience from a patient angle.
You didn't?
No. And in an authentic way. Like, what was the day-to-day like? Like, did you have to take time off work? Like, those were all the questions I was asking. And so I scheduled an appointment with my fertility doctor, Dr. Garcia.
What was the timeline between like your sister giving you this whisper and to you ending up meeting your fertility doctor? Because I know in my own experience, a lot of women that I spoke to, the decision-making process is long. And we sit with that and it's a hard decision. And we'll get to this, but I want to talk about sort of the difference of doing it in your 20s versus doing it in your 30s. But what was that timeline? Like your sister says this to you and you're at the doctor's office.
Yeah, so it was Christmas, December 25th, I got the whisper.
Okay.
And then it was mid-January, I had my first consultation. So it was about a month.
You moved fast. Yeah.
I think there was 3 reasons why I did move fast. Is A, I was on my parents' insurance and it covered my medication before I turned 25.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So
when
I was
did you
like,
turn 25?
my birthday's February 27th.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, okay, we have to act fast.
Yeah.
That was one factor. Factor 2 was just knowing I'm in school, so my time is a little bit more flexible. And this is the youngest and healthiest my eggs will ever be.
Yeah.
And so I had the first consultation and just doing my own research on clinics that had the highest live birth rate in Canada.
Which is so smart because especially here in New York now, there's a lot of these boutique-y places that offer all of these things. And I'm learning now where my journey is like the labs matter.
Yeah.
The patient experience matters. And so I think that's amazing that you did all of that research.
And So I had the consultation. I felt comfortable. And, you know, typically, and in Canada, I recommend every Canadian, it's free to go have a consultation with a fertility specialist and have your ovarian reserve tested, because you need to know what your ovarian reserve is before you're even eligible to have the egg freezing procedure.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Oh. So it tests egg quality, egg count, and how receptive your ovaries are going to be to the medication.
I don't think I could be wrong. So nobody like quote me, but I don't know if we do that here.
Really?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. So for me, it's now like almost 5-6 years ago that I froze my eggs. They tested AMH and FSA. I don't think they tested all of that.
Okay. We'll chat.
Yeah. Our healthcare systems are so different. We'll talk about that too. Yeah. But okay, so they do all this testing.
And they're like, you're a great candidate. And they were like, okay, let's get started. And I was...
What did you feel like when I have a couple of questions. One, was your doctor surprised to have a almost 25-year-old sitting in front of them?
No.
No.
She was so happy.
I bet.
She had gone through IVF herself, and she was like, I wish I did this at your age. And she also has a blog on social media. So she was like, if you share anything, like I want to reshare it. I want to talk about it on social media, because people freeze their eggs, and this is the narrative that it's reactive, not proactive.
Totally. I mean, this is why this podcast was born, because it was my story of being 37 and feeling like I'm up against this clock. I have to do it. And then as a therapist, hearing so many other women's stories in the same boat, being like mid to later 30s, and we were reactive. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think your journey is amazing, and that you shared your journey is amazing, because we want women to be in a more proactive space, not reactive space.
And planning. And it's okay to plan.
Totally. I love planning. I wish I planned sooner. Yeah. But yeah.
So, that was pretty much how it started. And I had some plans around my birthday, and I just really had to figure out what was the last possible date I can do this procedure under insurance.
How did you feel emotionally leaving your consult? Did you feel excited? Did you feel overwhelmed? Like, I know I left my consult with like a range of emotions. Like, how did you feel? How did you feel overall? Like, I'm just curious emotionally what was happening for you.
It's interesting. I get this question quite often, and I had no emotional response towards it. Okay. I saw it as just a data point in my story.
Interesting.
Like, this is just part of the story, and it's something I did. And I think motherhood is so beautiful, but I think you can be strategic about it.
Yeah, I want you to share that too, because I think your reasons... Well, give us the timeline, and then I'll get into all the other questions.
Yeah. So I started my egg freeze 14-day. I would say it's an overall 14-day cycle around early March. So this is actually my 1 year anniversary. Yeah.
Oh my God, happy anniversary. Perfect thing to be doing on your anniversary.
I know. And so from day 1 to day 14, every morning, I had an ultrasound, blood work. Every night around 6 or 7 p.m., I had my shots. And I essentially did my trigger shot, which is the day before your retrieval at a Leafs game. We have the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Isn't that funny? Do you have any other funny places that you had to do shots? I've done my shots like when I was egg freezing, like in the back of a car, about to go into a concert in the city, like because we were saying off camera, like life does not stop.
No.
So how did you? Yeah, I would curious like more funny places you had to do your shots, and how did you manage? The logistics are tough. Like it's real. Like life doesn't stop. I was still seeing so many clients. So I'm like racing to my appointments, trying to see clients. I'm sure you're like racing to classes. Like how did you fit it all in?
I'm very, very grateful for my support system. So my family, my boyfriend, my sister, they were all there through this process. I think that's why I also felt very comfortable going into it, like with a logical perspective, is because I had my sister as this encyclopedia, sharing the studies that I should read, sharing
that's amazing.
Like evidence, because being in a PhD, I don't make decisions without data. And so I just live my life that way. And so egg freezing is just a data point.
Yeah.
And so reading all the evidence, I'm like, I find so much comfort in data And
you just go in more informed and empowered. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the process was really smooth. I actually moved home to my parents for the actual 14 days because it was closer to the clinic. And the clinic staff, they're an all-female team, and they were just so welcoming and so lovely that I had a great time, honestly. Oh, great time. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
What I hear a lot here, unfortunately, and not everybody's experience is the same, is, and I'm curious because we do have very different healthcare systems, that women can feel like on a conveyor belt when they're doing this experience. And it sounds like you had a very different experience. You didn't feel that way.
Not at all. I had extra video filming time as well with my fertility specialist.
I saw that.
And I felt very supported. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so huge, like to have, and you're mentioning, you know, people outside your doctors, like your family, your partner, your sister, like I always reiterate and reinforce, like you have to have a support system in place because it's so taxing, you know, even if it's like you're not good with needles and you want to have a girlfriend there to do shots, I think, or just someone to talk to or vent, like I'm at this game and now I have to go do this shit. Like I think it's so important to have that place, and everything you did before freezing, like doing the research, having your sister as this other, you know, resource of knowledge is really sounds like it set you up for success with this experience.
I'm super grateful. And I would say to every woman, even just thinking about it, or you're on the fence about it, do your research, be informed. Knowledge is power. Totally. And there are so many AI tools nowadays as well. If you aren't from a science background and you're a little bit unsure on how to read a research paper, there are great tools out there that just can digest it for you and give you the main points.
Yeah, because Google is not always your best friend.
No, do not Google this.
Don't Google. Yeah. So did you, any other funny places that you had to do your shots besides the
It's the public washrooms for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You're in a stall and you hear women coming in and they have absolutely no idea what you're doing behind the door. I think it's like so fun and it's like flirty. I call it flirty and enthusiastic. Like it's just like so sneaky. But the hockey game was the funniest because you have to essentially, you're going into this huge game where you can't take needles.
Oh my gosh. So how did you?
So you have to give your freezer bag to security, and then security has to put it in the freezer or the fridge.
Yeah, right.
And that's a whole process. You have to bring paperwork. You have to plan.
Yeah. Well, and for those listening that might not know why you have to kind of do it at these funny places is because you have to do these shots at a certain time. So if you don't want life to completely stop and you still want to go out and there's events you want to go to, you have to find a spot to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wild. So your story went viral. Like, did you go into this knowing that you would share it on social media?
I was never going to share this online.
Really?
Ever. I was like, no way. That is way too intimate of a subject. I also, in academia, people don't have social media publicly other than if they were only sharing their research.
Oh, is that right?
So for me to share my life, it's taboo in and of itself. And so I am nervous just even talking about the fact that I have social media in the academic setting. And so I was like, oh, no way am I sharing this, because if my team and my colleagues see this, it seems unprofessional. That's the narrative. And that was what I was going with until my sister and my boyfriend is also a physician.
Okay.
They both were like, Shania, no, like if you're comfortable, you need to share this because we don't see the patient experience enough, even as people in medicine. And
because even if you're the doctor, you don't, unless you've lived it yourself, you don't know the patient experience. Yeah.
And they were like, the fact that you're young, you have such a different perspective to share than anyone else doing this. That's it when it is reactive versus proactive.
Totally.
And your perspective of just how you plan your life is so fascinating that would be helpful for women. And then from a cultural perspective, my parents are from Trinidad, so I'm not from India or anything, but I think I can represent the South Asian community in a way that culturally many people have pressures in the household that you have to go to school and then get married and then have kids. That's your story.
That's the path. Yep. That's supposed to be,
That's it.
Yeah.
And so I think pushing back on that was very powerful for me to be able to speak to and, share with women just that doesn't have to be your story.
Absolutely not. And usually it's not everybody's story. And this is, the intention of this podcast of Quiet the Clock, because we do feel those societal pressures or those timelines that are laid out for us, just like you said. And we turn around and we don't meet those. And then what do we start saying about ourselves? We start blaming ourselves. We start feeling bad. We start comparing ourselves to other people. So I love that you kind of stepped outside of what is expected in academia and social media and just said there's a bigger reason here.
There's a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And through that, there was 3 main groups of people that I found resonating with the content in different ways. There was group A, women who were in my age range, and they were like, wow, like the fact that you can just plan and think about options for your future self is powerful. And that's inspiring me to think about the same, or even just do my own research.
Yeah.
And B, there was a group where lots of women in my messages would share their infertility journeys and share like, oh my gosh, I am 50 now and I wish I talked about this when I was younger. No one talked about it when I was younger.
Yeah.
And looking back, like I wish I had someone like you at your age sharing.
Like for you to get those?
I cried a lot.
I bet.
I cried a lot. I felt reassured in my decision to share it on social media.
Could not be more validating. Could not be more validating.
And then there was group 3 where a lot of people had the perspective, why do women need to plan? Why do you need to be thinking about this?
Probably
What's
coming
the point?
from men.
I know.
Sorry.
They were coming from men.
Sorry.
And it was like, that was shocking to me, that perspective, which granted, whenever videos go viral, there's polarity in the conversation.
Totally.
But
everyone has something to say. Yeah. But I think, we were saying this off camera too. It's like, as women, we have been shared like very little, and we're, I think, having to have these type of conversations or sort of forge our own path, do our own research, and we have known so little, and men know like nothing. So I think it's important for men to hear these stories too and understand that there is this biological clock. It's a real thing. Like there is pressure to that, and if we're not planning ahead, you can find yourself in your 30s, later 30s, like with feeling like you're running out of time. And so I think they need to be informed just as much as we do.
Well, I think for many of us, we all want a meaningful life.
Totally.
And I feel, again, for many of us, we don't want to live with regret. What is the best way for your future self to not live with regret?
I love that.
It's to plan. I think we are so great at planning in our professional lives, but why can't we take a step back and look at our lives from a third perspective and plan?
Yeah, which is why your story is so powerful, because I think in your 20s, or I'll just share me personally, in my 20s, I wasn't thinking about family planning. I also wasn't thinking I would have to think about family planning, right? So you're sort of sold the story and this fantasy and timeline that like, you will meet that person and you will get pregnant easily and there's the white picket fence, and it's not the case. So I think those narratives reinforce this idea like you won't have to worry about it. So I wasn't worrying about it. And I think a lot of women were not worrying about it until you had to worry about it, which is why it's so amazing that you have this voice now. And I appreciate you being here, sharing your story, because I think a lot of women should plan and think about the future and think about, and not just in career or like where you want to live or what kind of, maybe you have a goal to buy a condo, whatever. But yeah, what do you want? What does your future self want in terms of family and motherhood?
And if that's something you want.
Right.
Getting very granular with your dreams and your goals. Is that something you want? What does that look like? And asking yourself those really hard questions. I think we all, I call it being a fertile fairy. I think we're all sold this narrative in elementary school, high school, when we do health class. That
what's happening in health class? Like, I don't know what happens in Canada, but like nothing's happening
in health class. You're sold the dream that you meet a boy and you have sex with a boy,
but also don't get pregnant.
You will get pregnant.
But also don't get pregnant, because it's so easy to get pregnant.
It's so easy to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And so we're sold that narrative. So every woman lives their lives, me included, until my sister had this conversation on Christmas Day, that you can just get pregnant whenever you want.
Whenever you're ready.
You can snap your fingers and it just happens. And that's the conversation I wanted to push, is egg freezing aside, just talk about your fertility.
Understand your fertility.
Mm-hmm.
Go. I think also too, for at least a lot of clients I've seen, women I speak to, there is this fear around going to get their fertility check because they're afraid of what they're going to find out. And I do know women that have gone sort of on a whim and it was not good, you know? And so you're sort of sent into this like panic of what do I do? But if having information is better than not, because then at least you can plan and make a plan. Yeah. I love two things that you said. One about regret, and regret was the reason that I actually chose to freeze my eggs because when I went to my consult at 37, you know, I didn't have the money to do it. I didn't have any coverage for anything. And it was so, at the time I couldn't afford it. And I was also like, okay, I will go into debt for this, but I don't even know what I'll get. I could get an egg, I could get 2 eggs, I could get nothing. And so there was all this fear and uncertainty around it. And then there was, you know, this emotional layer of like, oh my God, why am I here? Like, why am I having to even make this decision? And I finally said to myself, I do not want to regret not doing this.
No.
And that was like what pushed me over the edge to make the decision. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, no regrets, you know, and I was saying to you off camera too, like your future self, if you have to use these eggs, you're probably already so damn proud of yourself, but you will be so grateful and proud of this young version of yourself that thought about the future version of yourself.
Well, I think about life like a book. I think that you're creating the outline and you're filling in the details. And so if you're thinking about the next chapter or a couple chapters ahead, how can you work towards planning the details and planting the seeds for those future chapters to go as planned? And I think it comes from having a very clear vision of what you want your life to look like as well. I don't think we're taught in school how to plan the dreams and aspirations that we have and how to create the pathways to get there. And professionally, but also personally and socially and in every facet of your life. So I think it comes down to what does your dream life look like and then work backwards.
Yeah. And I think what's so unfortunate, but I think there's this shift happening absolutely, especially with these type of conversations of encouraging young people to think about what they actually want, right? When I was growing up, it was like, go to college, go into business, like someone else decided the boxes. And it was no one saying like, what do you really want? And I thought it was really great what you said, to decide even if you want motherhood. Because just because we're women doesn't mean we're meant to be mothers or we have to want to be mothers. And I come across this so much in my work where women are like, I don't feel this desire to be a mother. What's wrong with me? I'm like, nothing's wrong with you, right? And so getting really clear on what your own vision is based on what you actually want, not what you're told to want.
Exactly. And things change. So, for example, now I can see myself having kids in a decade, but that could be earlier and that could be later. But it's giving your future self options.
Options, 100%. Well, you've sort of throughout our conversation shared reasons why, but can you more specifically share like why was it important for you to do this now? You know, what were your reasons for wanting to freeze your eggs now? 3
main reasons. Number 1, my insurance coverage.
Yeah, there you go. That's a big one.
Medication is expensive.
It's crazy expensive.
This process is expensive. So medication coverage was 1. Number 2, I know, like when I close my eyes and I envision my future life, I have kids. I don't know when, but I know I will have children. And I've always wanted to be a mom. And that's one of my life dreams. Yeah. It's to have a great career, but also to be a great mother.
Oh, I love that.
And my current purpose is to fuel my career because I love it. But I know there's going to come a point when I want to shift gears a little bit. And so for me, thinking ahead, I want to pour 110% of myself right now into this current life that I live so that I have the luxury of taking time off when I am a mom to be fully engaged in motherhood. Yeah. So how can I best do that? Especially being in a PhD, you're in education for so long that I have to think ahead of my working years before motherhood are pushed back a little bit than everyone who is right out of college at 21 starting to work.
Or even just doing a master's. It's 2 years versus PhD, which is 5 years?
Hopefully we'll finish this year, so mine will be 3.
Amazing, amazing.
But that's me also rushing that timeline.
Okay.
And so just thinking about motherhood, how can I make sure future Shania who wants to be a mom has options and feels comfortable, doesn't feel like she has regret, is super excited about the journey? And then number 3 is just the science.
Yeah.
I am in my prime. I am
are.
in my prime. I have...
You are in so many ways. Coming from a 40-something-year-old.
Yeah.
No, I still feel in my prime.
You're in your prime. You're still in your prime. And so thinking about just genetic abnormalities, thinking about egg quality, egg count, fertility in general. These are the youngest, healthiest eggs I will ever have.
Yeah.
And so how can I make sure that with the help of science, I love science, I have a great pregnancy and experience when the time is right.
Yeah, I love that. I love everything you're saying. It's so important. And I love thinking about motherhood in the way of like, how do I set myself up for success when I want to be a mother? And, you know, what is my capacity going to be? Like, I want to be in a place where maybe I have more capacity or I have the ability to shift a little bit out of work. And, you know, I had so much angst around being a mom older and having my son at 40. But after he was here, I was like, this makes so much sense. Like I have the resources to do the things I want him or, you know, he wants to do. I don't know. He's 2. He doesn't, you know, he likes trains. I don't know. I have time. I have patience. Like it's just, I'm in a different space. And I think thinking about motherhood in that way of like where you want to be in your life and what helps you, supports you to be a really good mom. Because I think now thinking back, if I was doing this in my 30s, I was like, I don't know if I'd be the type of mom I am now in my 40s.
Exactly. And again, it comes with the clarity in your vision. What type of mother do you want to be and what type of childhood do you want to have for your children?
Yeah. I mean, it's just everything you're saying just encourages people to think about things in a little bit of a different way that I don't think that we were encouraged to think about. Like, what do we actually want? How do we see our, you know, life design? Like, how do we set ourselves up for success? So I think you're prompting really amazing questions for women your age. Again, like when I was 20, like these were not things I were thinking about. I was thinking about career and what I wanted to do. And that was kind of it, and going out and partying and having fun with my friends. And you could still do all that. But no one was prompting me to think about things in this way. So I think it's so amazing that you've shared your story, that you're continuing to share your story, that have these thought-provoking questions about how do you plan ahead and how do you think about what you really want. I think it's so amazing.
Thank you. It's a conversation we need to have more.
Totally.
Like I think also this narrative that, you know, the feminine masculine energy narrative that's on social media right now.
Big one. Yeah.
You are told that if you're a woman and you're strategic, you're in your masculine energy, and that's not something very feminine to do. And this idea that being strategic and being focused with how you plan your life is masculine is such a toxic way to look at women taking control, really,
of our own lives.
Yeah. And women weren't even allowed to sign off for their own credit cards till 1972. So
insanity.
It's insanity, and we're coming such a long way, but I think there's still more work to be done.
Yeah. They want to hold us down because we thrive. Yeah. And we were saying too, like, these conversations weren't happening even 10 years ago. So the more information that's out there, and I think everyone has a right to their own choice, but you deserve to have the information to make your choice. And if you don't have that, there's no choice to be made. I'm curious, you know, we are in different decades, and a lot of these conversations, you are the youngest person that we've had on this podcast, which I think is so amazing because I want younger women to be thinking about this and have this information and make a choice. As a woman in their 30s doing it, there's this whole emotional layer and pressure. You know, not just fertility related. In your 20s, do you feel timelines or pressure, or what is it like for you? Do you kind of fall into some of that?
It's a ticking time bomb in the back of your head. You have this weight on your shoulder, and you also feel pressured to make decisions fast. It's like, okay, need to find the partner, need to figure out my career, need to figure out when I'm going to have kids in all of the mix. And so I think for me, and all my friends, all we talk about is, okay, is this going to be the person that's going to be potentially the father to our children? And those decisions, I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders slightly, and I have a little bit more breathing room knowing I have options for future me.
What have your friends said about you egg freezing? Have any of them like been encouraged to look into their fertility?
I would say so I have two groups of friends. My main group of friends, they're in academia, medicine, science, and so they understand the logistics of egg freezing, and they are also in training for so long, just similar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think everyone in that space has been thinking about their fertility, and it wasn't very shocking. But for my friends, my childhood friends that aren't necessarily have a science background at all or have never heard of this until I brought it up, it's actually very different conversations that I'm having, and it's informative. But I think to a lot of my friends and just people in my circles have thought critically about their own biases and their own cultural influences that they weren't even necessarily conscious of until I froze my eggs. You grow up and you're raised and your parents kind of just say, oh, you're going to have kids one day. You're going to be a great mom. And, as a kid, I had like the dolls. I had the little kitchen set. Like I loved to play mom.
Yeah.
And so if you just kind of follow the narrative until you were 26, 27, and you realize, wait, is that something I genuinely want? So those questions are now circulating, which is so fabulous.
Amazing. No, I know. And as you're talking, I'm thinking like, while this is a conversation about egg freezing and fertility, it's such a bigger conversation about permission to think outside the box, permission to push back on the narratives, permission to question the narratives, permission to go off the path that is told to you. And this is a lot of what we talk about on this podcast. And so I think, it's not just about egg freezing. It's about all of these, what does future me really want? And how do I think about my life on my own terms?
Yeah. And I'm building the Do It All Girl, which stands for DIA. And it's a community I've had since 2021.
Okay.
And now we're building like the consumer product end of it. And the whole premise is that women can do it all.
Yeah.
But you need the tools and systems in place to actually accomplish it all.
Oh, I love that.
And so for me, egg freezing was one of my tools. It's one of the tools in my toolkit that I had an option to use and is for future me. And it is enabling me right now to do it all, in addition to the AI tools and all the other systems that I use. But I think we need to change the narrative that women don't need to just focus on one thing at a time to be exceptional.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, so I want to ask you two more things before we wrap up. One, what would you say to a 20-something-year-old listening to this podcast?
You are allowed to plan and be strategic about your life, and no one should tell you otherwise. And you are allowed to feel in control, and you should feel in control. And I hope that this podcast empowers you just a little bit more to feel in control of future you and really think about her. Think about her in your day-to-day thoughts. Think about her in your decisions. She deserves it.
Oh, I love that so much. I think I want to add to that and I think this was your experience from everything that you're saying. Surround yourself with people that support you in that, right? Because I think there are going to be some haters and some people that, and a lot of times it's projection because maybe they don't have the courage to think outside the box or think for a future self. So do all of that and also find the people that support you in doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, last thing before we wrap, tell everybody where they can find you to see your story. If they haven't seen your story, tell them about this community that you have.
You can find me on all platforms at Well by Shania. And I guess that's it. Yeah, you find me on all platforms at Well by Shania.
Can they learn about your community on there too?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have an entire 35-part egg freezing series day by day on TikTok. Amazing. And a sit down with my fertility doctor on YouTube. So all the pressing questions that my audience has shared and really wanted to open up on, I asked my fertility doctor.
And she answered all of them.
The gossip.
Really? Yeah. Was there one question that stood out to you?
Mm-hmm. This was an interesting question, is people were surprised that you were born with the amount of eggs that you have.
Yeah, the people don't know that. Yeah.
I think people were like, how can I have healthier eggs? Well, you were born with them. Yeah.
And just how they diminish over time, right? There's a lot that we just don't know. No. We didn't learn in health class because nothing was happening in health class. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think you spreading your story and being on social media is so, so powerful, especially for your generation, because I shared with you, I have not met a woman in their mid to late 30s that said, I'm happy when I did this. I met so women that said, I wish I had done this sooner. So you putting your story out there and being vulnerable and encouraging people to think about future self is so, so important. So thank you for that.
And thank you for having me on the show.
Oh my God, I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
If you like the episodes that you're hearing and you want to hear more, please subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more incredible stories and tools.
When I froze my eggs at 37, I felt alone, I felt unsure, I felt confused and uncertain. And when you're considering such a big decision, feeling those ways do not feel good. So we have created a step-by-step guide to egg freezing so no one else has to feel that way. If you are considering egg freezing, if you're curious about what the process looks like or what you should be thinking about, then this guide is for you. We were really thoughtful in how we put it together. I think it's a great guide. I think it's really comprehensive and covers a lot of the things to be thinking about, to be considering, and maybe some things you didn't even realize you should be thinking about or considering. The goal is to not have anyone feel alone in this journey. So if you're thinking about this decision, sign up through our website, quiettheclock.com, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at quiettheclockpod. This is a very big decision, so I don't want anyone to feel alone in it. So if you're thinking about it, grab this guide, and you can also DM me with any questions. I'm here to support you through this decision and this journey.